Hello everyone, this is my 7-round NFL mock draft for the Houston Texans using PFF's mock draft simulator. Now a couple of things before we begin. First of all, this is what I call a GM mock draft. I'm acting as the GM. In no way am I trying to predict what Bill O'Brien is actually going to do in the draft. That's way too difficult, and no one can really accurately do that anyway. So the second thing I'd like to mention is that if you watched some of my other videos, then you might notice that you see some of these prospects and some of these players over and over again. The reason for that is because using this simulation at certain points in the draft, these players are always available and they're the best player that I really like there. I don't like anyone else. So that's why some players, like for instance the first guy off the board here, Tyler Johnson, you'll see him in a lot of my other mock drafts because I really like him a lot. So, and then finally, the last note is that I have difficulty pronouncing some of the names sometimes. I haven't heard other people say all of the names, so please bear with me on that issue and try not to be too critical because some of these names are just really difficult to know exactly how to pronounce correctly. So, okay, well, thank you very much, and let's dive right in. At selection 44, I took Tyler Johnson, wide receiver, University of Minnesota. He's one of my favorite players in this draft. When looking at the tape, you see he gets open quite a bit. One of the biggest issues with him is that going deep down the field, like fade routes on the outside against corners, he has really a lot of difficulty stacking the corner, getting past them, and getting separation. But beyond that specific route, a lot of the other routes, he just gets open. He plays in the slot. He can play on the outside as well. His releases are decent enough, I feel. And with his route running ability, I feel like he can be like a Davante Adams kind of. That's what some of the other analysts have comped him to. And I agree a fair bit with that. He's a guy who's a bit slower. He's going to be in the 4.6 range, 4.6 range for the 40-yard time. Davante Adams ran something like a 4.55. So very similar in that regard. And both have really, really excellent route running ability. And Tyler Johnson just produced. He had like almost every game he had at least 100 yards receiving and like 7, 8, 9, 10 catches, multiple touchdowns, picking up first down after first down after first down. So I'm a big fan of his. The risk with him is that there's kind of a bit of buzz or rumor with kind of his personality maybe, and I'm not exactly sure what that is because I'm not privy to any background information that actual NFL teams are able to get their hands on. So I'm not sure exactly what that is. So that's why I think he falls a little bit near 50 or out of the top 50. Moving on, at selection 75, I took Kayvon Wallace, cornerback, Clemson University. This guy's another guy that I really like a lot. He's some people see him as a safety, some people see him as a cornerback. Strictly, I would use him as an off-zone slot cornerback, and I think you would get plus play from him almost immediately. I think he's kind of similar to Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who came out of the University of Florida and was drafted by the New Orleans Saints maybe like 2 years ago, I want to say now. I think he's kind of similar to that. He's a guy that'll play in the slot. He'll play in the slot, play in the box, really sound, solid tackler, nice speed. I think he's like 4.5 at over 200 pounds. The thing with him is don't play him at safety, or at least I really didn't love the tape, his safety play, because I noticed that he doesn't tackle in the open field very well at all. So if he's like 20, 25 yards off the line of scrimmage and having to play more of a center fielder kind of role, then he's not quite fast enough or instinctual enough and to play that position well, I feel. And so slot cornerback is where I really see him excelling. Moving on to selection 90, I took Davon Hamilton, defensive tackle, Ohio State University, the Ohio State. Anyway, he's another guy that I'm decently high on. I think he's a solid player. He's got some juice, as some analysts would say. He's got a bit of get off, decent hand usage, can certainly some good power to his game as well. I think he needs to maybe refine his technique a bit more and get stronger against double teams. But most, if not almost all, of the interior defensive linemen that enter the NFL need to get stronger against double teams anyway. So that's not really a huge knock. I just think at around, pick 90, there's not a ton of amazing players available, and he's someone who I feel decently confident enough that he could become something like a above average player, not like a Pro Bowler or anything, but just a good, solid, above average guy that you really are happy to have on your team. Next, at 111, I selected Geno Stone, safety, University of Iowa. This is another guy that, just like Kayvon Wallace and Tyler Johnson, he's another guy that PFF, Pro Football Focus, is pretty high on, and I'm super high on him as well. I should mention PFF is not as high on Tyler Johnson as I am, I believe. But anyway, I digress. Geno Stone, he can be summed up in two ways. Super instinctual, comes from the University of Iowa, that's been a safety factory over the past couple of years with Micah Hyde, Amani Hooker, and I'm missing the third guy. Oh, sorry, Desmond King, who's with the Los Angeles Chargers right now. Iowa, just for some reason, they do a really good job of coaching safety prospects, and if you're playing the certain scheme, I think they run a lot of zone there, then, and if you do that, if that's your scheme, then that safety prospect does really well. So I like him a lot. The risk with him just is that he's a shorter guy with shorter arms, and he's not like a blazing fast 40 time. I think it's somewhere in like maybe the 4.6 range. But because of his instincts, that makes up a ton, because he sees things before they're happening, and then that really negates not having something like 4.45 40-yard dash speed. It can be made up a lot, especially at the safety position. Okay, so moving on, at 171, I selected Carter Coughlin, edge player, University of Minnesota. He's a guy that I like more than 171. I like him, maybe in like 120, 130, 140 range. I think he's got a lot of, a lot of hustle to his game. He's got decent length or size. The issue with him for an edge player is that he's barely over the threshold of 250 pounds. He's like, I think he weighed in at like 251 or 253 at the NFL Combine this year. So he's a smaller guy, but with the 3-4 that Houston runs, I think he could transition into a really solid, at minimum, maybe a backup rotational guy on the edge. And that's certainly a position that, at least depth-wise, that the Texans could benefit from. The last two selections, I kind of want to group them together. Darrell Williams, guard out of Mississippi State, and James Morgan, quarterback out of FIU, Florida International University, if I'm not mistaken. At this point in the draft, I found it really difficult, and in all of these mock draft simulations, I find it really hard to find a guy that super fits a need that I like a lot. They're just gone at this point in the draft. So I felt like you can never go wrong with some more offensive line help. Darrell Williams at least brings some versatility in that he played center at Mississippi State, and I'm guessing that NFL scouts are viewing him more as a guard. That's why he's listed as a guard, I'm guessing. So he can play center, he can play guard. So you're getting some positional versatility with this player, which I think is really nice. And then James Morgan, yeah, I know you have Deshaun Watson, and Deshaun Watson is a top 10 quarterback. He's really good. He's he's like the main reason why Houston has been able to make the playoffs for a number of years now. Why I took Morgan is just because he's one of a handful of quarterback prospects in the later rounds of this draft that I really like a lot. And I think the value of taking him here at almost 250, that's like nearly the end of the draft, I think that's amazing value. And you can flip him for a pick later if Deshaun Watson, because he runs around a lot, plays hero ball a bit. If he gets injured for a couple of games, this guy might be able to step in and, maybe win 50% of the games, or at least not suck horribly. So that's why I selected James Morgan. And then finally, I want to touch on this trade that I made. Indianapolis moved up from 44 up to 40, or excuse me, let me redo this. Indianapolis received the 40th and 248th pick from the Houston Texans, and the Texans received the 44th pick and the 75th pick. To be quite honest, I think this is fairly unrealistic because giving up a 248 to get a 75, especially dealing with Chris Ballard in Indianapolis, I think there's almost no way in hell that would actually happen unless Indianapolis was really, really desperate for that player at 40. I wanted to try and trade back some with Houston because they didn't have a lot of picks in this draft. So that's why I wanted at least one trade in this simulation. So overall, I think a better way of looking at this is that maybe getting somewhere in the range of like a 120 to 140 is more realistic for the kind of compensation that Houston could expect to receive if they trade back with their first selection at 40. They trade back 4 to maybe 10 spots in the draft, which I think would be fine because there's still going to be good players available or similar tier players available. There's not really a ton of difference between 40 and 50 in almost any draft. In fact, it's like literally almost zero. You're getting a very similar player at both of those selections. So, okay, well, this has been a bit longer than I wanted. It's over 13 minutes. Thank you very much if you've been here the entire time. I really appreciate that. I'm a new channel here. I just started doing videos a couple of days ago. I really love the draft, especially acting as a GM and building rosters. It's a super passion of mine. I just effing love doing that. Analyzing players, looking who can fit, etc., etc. So if you made it all the way through, I want to give you a handshake and a hug and thank you very much. So, okay, well, you have a great day. Bye-bye.